I think the whole social media world and this standard of living and communicating and getting inspired is their standard. That was the first generation that had that. And also not to be underestimated is then the maybe the bad side of social media, whole comparison, which means, for example, 31% tell us, hey, I get pressure when I'm social media, how my academic or just professional life develops. And they think, of course, maybe I'm not getting fast enough ahead compared to my colleagues that were in the same university and same school.
Das ist der HSG Student Podcast. Mein Name ist Oli und zusammen gehen wir auf die Suche nach spannenden Geschichten und Persönlichkeiten von der HSG. Welcome to the vortex where hype meets reality, and welcome to another episode in the HSG Student Podcast. Today, we're slicing through the noise surrounding Generation Z, the cohort that has been labeled everything from tech-addicted and impatient, environmentally and healthy, conscious, the saviors of our corporate environmental future. Gen Z is the generation of people that has been born between, depending on the definition, between 1995 and 2010, and which has hence lived and can't imagine to live and remember a life without a smartphone. To introduce you a little bit more to Generation Z, I found some facts about them. They today make up about 30% of the world's population, and they're expected to account for 27% of the workforce by 2025. 77% of Gen Z believe that good work-life balance is important to them. 3 in 4 working Gen Z say they prefer working in a hybrid or remote mode. And interestingly, also 40% of working Generation Z people claim that they want to leave their job in the next 2 years. Obviously, these aspects of Generation Z make them a highly relevant group for businesses as customers and employees, and for government policymakers as a new population group that has very different needs and expectations than previous generations. At least, this is what Generation Z experts propagate. In Switzerland, and particularly on my LinkedIn feed, Generation Z experts such as Jan Meyer or Joe Dietrich, with Seam and even more social media agencies have successfully created what I would say is a huge buzz and are all over the place claiming they know how Generation Z works, offering services related to attracting Generation Z as talents and customers. And this is the right moment to introduce my guest, Yannick Blättler. He is an HSG graduate from 2020 in business innovation. Mm-hmm. He probably just merely belongs to this group, and he has successfully built up a Generation Z agency. Welcome, Yannick.
Thank you, Oli. Thanks for the introduction.
If I calculated correctly, I'm not sure whether you technically still belong to Generation Z, but nevertheless, would you say, do you identify at least as a Generation Z member?
That's a very good question. So technically, I just turned 31 when I started the company, or I had the first thought I was 22. So no, I'm not belonging to the Gen Z directly, but I also never thought of like, I'm just because I'm Gen Z, that's why I'm doing this. It's more like I want to translate things. And I think I in a lot of things, yes, I feel like Gen Z, definitely.
For instance, what kind of characteristics would you say do you share?
Yeah, I think you said their impatience, like the whole instant thing vibe and the whole social vibe and social daily life is probably definitely some part of me, yes. But in certain business areas, because as an entrepreneur and the whole responsibility, probably have some more conservative thoughts at some points. So that's what I'm also doing, and probably a good mix.
So let me introduce you before we jump in a little bit more properly. As mentioned, you built up the Generation Z agency called Neovisio. Exactly. You're focusing there on marketing, strategy, people and culture with respect to Gen Z and also Alpha, I think, which is the generation that follows after Gen Z. You did your bachelor at University of Zurich in business administration, and as mentioned, you completed the business innovation master's here. You're also a lecturer right now at the University of Applied Sciences in Zurich and Lucerne. You're a board member at Messe Luzern, a conference site. You're also a board member in a job portal in central Switzerland. And you're also a top voice on LinkedIn. But mainly, I think you're CEO and founder of the Neo Network and Neovisio, which some kind of belong together. So from all of these things, what do you identify the most with?
Probably I identify with NeoViso the most. Neo Network was like an association we founded before, and out of that I got some ideas to actually consult companies. And I think the whole NeoViso part is definitely my most identity. As a CEO, as a founder, yes, I do a lot of speakings, as you said, and just the exchange with a lot of business people in Switzerland, leadership people, discussing about, okay, what's coming, what's next. And I think that's very interesting questions. Yeah.
And what else do people need to know about you, or framed differently, what should people know about you that they usually don't when they just check out your LinkedIn profile?
So I grew up in Nidwalden, so central Switzerland, very traditional canton. Still a lot of friends there and active there. I did a lot of music when I was young. I actually almost studied jazz. I was playing a lot of trumpet, yes, and the drums. So it was a big passion for me. The whole music still is. We just founded an internal NeoViso band.
Oh, nice. And you're playing trumpet and drums at the same time?
Not at the same time. No, at the same time. Sometimes I recorded some things together. I also did some piano because you need to learn about like harmony, stuff exactly. But that was until Matura, and then I actually decided for business and keep music as a hobby. But that was definitely a big passion for me.
And why did you really decide eventually to go for business? I mean, from what I hear, you're multi-instrumentalist. Yes. That's usually a great start into a career.
Yeah, I was thinking about it for a long time, actually really going to study music, but I was talking to a lot of pro musicians at that time. I was also on tour with Seven, the musician, and he had a horn section, and I actually talked at some dinner to the trumpet player, and he said, yeah, he's playing so many concerts. And you just need to realize if you don't like teaching, you have to make sure that you don't end up teaching. And at one point I just decided, hey, it's better to have it as a hobby.
Understood. And now you ended up not doing many gigs, but many talks. Yes. We are actually now talking in the context of the St. Gallen Symposium, where you've been invited as a leader of tomorrow, maybe even as a leader of today, but let's let it open for discussion, to represent the younger generation of leaders, to challenge today's leadership practices, and jointly look for solutions to advance this planet to a better place, if we want so. Let me spare a brief word about the St. Gallen Symposium. It is the leading conference in the world for cross-generational dialogue, taking place every year in the first week of May at the University of St. Gallen, assembling numerous leaders of today and tomorrow from all over around the globe, such as this year Carsten Spohr, CEO of Lufthansa, Julia Navalnaya, or Federal Councillor Karin Keller-Sutter. This year's theme is Confronting Scarcity, and at this point, I also want to thank briefly the St. Gallen Symposium, and particularly Sabrina Domenic from the communication team of this year for making this podcast possible, that we can meet up. And let me just ask you real quick, what are your upcoming expectations for the symposium? We now have Wednesday, and the conference has just started and will continue until Friday.
Yeah, I think I'm really looking forward to meet a global picture of Gen Z, of course not the whole Gen Z as we have it, because it's definitely a very special field of young talents that are highly motivated, very intelligent, and very I would also say very critical to some topics. It was already interesting to have some discussions this morning, and just to get a good picture, because I was talking to people from India, from China, and from the United States, and it was so interesting to have already this perspective as young talents and young leaders of tomorrow. So a lot of interactions, good topics, and also a lot of good inputs for my business and for my future.
And as a first impression, the Gen Z, you're an expert for Gen Z, probably, let's say in Switzerland or Europe. Yeah. But what about the Gen Z? Is there already some things from other places in the world? Definitely. Are they very similar from what you can, from the first impression, or are they very different?
I think, of course, some context, and that's always what you do in generational research, that you try to understand what's the context. And of course, you have some global context of like technology, development, social media, all that stuff. But of course, there are so many local things. I mean, you said in the intro, Gen Z is a very large population, if you define it the largest. And that's not because of the West. It's actually of countries like China and India, because they had actually baby boom just recently. So it's a different context on the labor market, on wealth, on development, and it was really already interesting. So I really like those differences, and I can already tell you from this morning's discussion, and Gen Z from India is looking completely different at certain things. Just at public schools. I mean, we're talking about how many public schools are good and how they develop and what they would wish from India, for example, and here in Switzerland. To be fully honest, that's also a big Gen Z topic. We're such in a cloud, in a perfect world, to be fully honest, that young people, of course, can't compare often, but they know that as a reality. So I think this comparison is very interesting for me, and I also want to bring that into the company in the next week.
So you have international expansion plans, or do you want to tackle the international Gen Z population in Switzerland?
So currently, the most projects and the most Gen Z we talk to are really from Switzerland. We do some projects also in Germany and Austria. We also did some research in the UK or in the United States, but this was just project based. I think what I would really find interesting is probably having a hub, a NeoVisa hub in Singapore. That would be really interesting because I was there in my master's degree for a week in a program, and I think it's really cool to also explore Southeast Asia and all those countries.
And maybe to make it a more generalized discussion for a second, what is that makes GenZ so interesting to you that you said, I want to create, let's say, a business around it, or have a business model around Gen Z? Or Gen Z, as I said it in the beginning, wrongly, I suppose.
Certain people, they would say, yeah, you guys just are setting something up around Gen Z so you can sell it to us. Of course, you do marketing. Yeah, that's definitely the thing. But I never do just want to scare people. I just want to show data, results, demographics, technology that's around this Gen Z. So I mean, there are not that many people anymore that are coming into the labor market. So of course, the labor market is in favor of young people in almost every industry, I would say, in Switzerland. And on the study field, like the academic, but also on the apprenticeship way. I think it's also interesting, like how they interact, how they communicate, how they organize their life, and also what they expect. And you said it, like everything has to be instant, everything has to be very flexible. And yes, you can say, yeah, everyone wants that. That's correct. But I think when we observe a young generation, how even faster they expect it, and otherwise they get to another job, they get to another application field or another offering. That's very interesting to me. And yeah, at the end, it's also interesting to observe what do they want in the future. Can be sustainability, can be communication, it can be family time, it can be politics. That's what we also do. And to be fully honest, we wouldn't live with 35 people in this company now if it would just be me doing good sales and marketing. It's probably the market that says, hey, Yannick, we really have a problem to get young people on board. And actually, to close this off, the main question is always, are you relevant for the next generation as an industry or as a company? And often people realize, maybe we're not anymore.
And if you had to paint somehow like let's say a big picture of what is Gen Z and how does it differ to previous generations, based on your research that you've done with Neo Network, based on your work that you see in the field as a CEO of NeoVisio, what kind of figures or what kind of forms would be on that painting?
So first of all, what's really interesting, and I have this discussion a lot, is the mental health topic. Let's start there. I mean, we have like over 50%, 53% that tell us in different surveys and also other institutions that they're scared or they have thoughts about, okay, am I stable enough? Am I mentally healthy? So that's a very big topic. It also goes to happiness and fulfillment in your life, stuff like this. That's probably a bigger number than before. Also, when we talk to institutions that actually help and clinics that help young people, I think the whole social media world and this standard of living and communicating and getting inspired is their standard. That was the first generation that had that, and also not to be underestimated is then the maybe the bad side of social media, whole comparison, which means, for example, 31% tell us, hey, I get pressure when I'm social media, how my academic or just professional life develops. And they think, of course, maybe I'm not getting fast enough ahead compared to my colleagues that were in the same university and same school. These are not, Gen Z is not completely different humanity. It's the same people, they probably have same thoughts and expectations, but in certain points, just because of the context that they live in, it's different. And I always say everything has to be more instant, more flexible, and more clear. This is like a basic concept I teach everyone. And then you can think about, hey, is it enough in those three fields to Gen Z, for example.
And do you yourself, I think these 3 points and many more that you mentioned just before, do you see yourself as a, let's say you said translator in the beginning of, between this generation and businesses that are around? So this is for me really a descriptive and an interpretive role. But do you also, do you also kind of, not, I wouldn't say a moral judgment, but are you also interested in kind of think more about not only what is out there, but also whether is that a good development or a bad development? Is that also something that you tackle in your research and work?
Yes, definitely. I mean, on the one hand, that everyone is feeling that like the labor market, it's very well for the young generation, right? I mean, everyone can find a job. If a lot of them can find a job, it's very well. But also, that's a big topic we haven't mentioned yet, but also compared to all other countries probably, is the whole wealth and the whole how do you call it? Like Wohlstand. What's the name in English?
Welfare.
Yeah, welfare in Switzerland as general. For them, it's just normal. I'm not talking about just social welfare. I'm just talking the whole system of Switzerland. It's crazy how just standard it is. And that's a big question. Like, how do we keep that? How can we develop Switzerland, for example, as a country? What's good? What's the right moral? What's discipline towards the young generation, right? Yesterday, I was at an event and someone told me, or ask me on in front of 100 people, like, yeah, Yannick, you told us who's responsible for this generation, because I said, yeah, who's responsible? Probably a lot of parents, a lot of education system, maybe other systems, but parents are usually a big influencing factor to like how the mindset is of this generation, and not just because of social media. And they asked me, yeah, how would you raise your generation Z or Alpha kids if you have kids at one place? And I said, I think it's still very important. That's pretty timeless, that you can say, hey, discipline is a very important factor to give that to your next generation. Being polite and understanding how to deal with humans in a correct way, and also having patience. I think that's something we don't only need in individual development, but it's also something that I think the whole society is needing, that we can getting ahead, because it's not only looking good for the Gen Z, especially in Switzerland. I mean, if we don't have enough people and we have certain things, where are we going with this, right? And they always say, hey, Yannick, when everyone is just working 4 days instead of 5, we're getting nowhere. And I say, yes, probably Gen Z has to learn this as well. Hey, at one point we have to go the extra mile to keep this. It's not going to be just a new technology that will help us.
And I'm curious, because you said, come back again to this translation from, let's say, Neovisio to businesses. But I think there's also another translation involved from the Gen Z to you, or to you as Neovisio, that are we actually doing or telling the companies the right thing? Are we interpreting what's happening the right thing? How is this translation happening? Because I hear research, but what else is there? And what's contained in research?
That's a very good question. It's something I started very early on. It was never like just me telling companies things. It was always, okay, let's look at it. We do a lot of qualitative research, where we do a lot of focus groups and individual interviews in every industry. It's not just that we do like one big survey every year and that's it. Actually, is it a police? Is it like a Schindler? Is it a PostFinance or whatever company? We go there and actually try to talk to Gen Z, or sometimes also, of course, Gen Y, trying to understand, okay, what do you want, right? Then we reflect that also in our team. I mean, our whole team is out of Gen Z and Gen Y people, so we try to reflect that as well. And on the other hand, we also have a lot of quantitative data, where we do research with like several hundred young people every month, I would say, sometimes every week, to all the different industries. So like banking, health, I don't know, like fashion, like beauty, like banking, whatever you have there. And we try to do that as well. So that's what we do almost in every project. And that's the base to put the strategy on top, to put the next steps. And of course, the whole, let's say, aggregated data or insights, I try to get into my speeches and show the data as well.
And if you look at the whole aggregated data, I think the 101 in statistics that we learn is look at the mean, but also look at standard deviation and variance. And what makes me skeptical about this whole Gen Z, let's say, trend that I see on LinkedIn mostly, where people advocate, hey, you have to go into that, is I always get the sense of Gen Z is like one big thing, and everyone treats Gen Z as one group of similar people.
Yeah, that's not true. Yeah.
I probably think that's not true. Can you expand a bit on what you see in terms of variance and standard deviation within this generation? Is it more than in other generations? And I would be interested in having a brief description from your side.
So basically, the first mistake you can do is just saying, okay, let's look at data from Gen Z, whatever, and then let's take it as a standard. Yes, we have some data that works pretty well. For example, how fast you want to do stuff, or stuff like this. That this really works well for everyone from every kind of industry and level of education, whatever. But that's what I told you just like some minutes ago. It's very important to go in every industry and talk to people. For example, in healthcare or like the care job, Pflege, not just doctors, but the others. Like, what do they want? For example, these are other people than when I talk to people that could be, police people or like people that work in business or in pharmacy. So we try to go in there, and what we see usually is, yes, you have some standards for all the Gen Z, like some you can see
impatient, technology savvy.
Yeah, exactly. Those things, yes. Also here, there's some difference, but that's like a good trend you can look at. But the differences are usually even larger, I would say, because I think like within Gen Z, and that's also what we observe, is because the individual, like to be individual, was always probably a big thought and like a big expectation in life, also in earlier generations. But I would even say, although it doesn't look like this in social media, I mean, life is still not only on social media, it's out there. And a lot of individual interests, individual development interests and requirements, I think that's very important to tackle and to understand. So we have a big standard variance to understand, hey, not everyone is the same, and let's go into this industry, let's go into this education level whatsoever. So that's what we're trying to look at. Of course, probably you get a lot of more interesting data if you have, Bundesamt für Statistik, and then really, go for the correlations and causalities of like a lot of more data they have. Because for us, we're not publishing just data for this. We're usually doing the data to help the certain companies or help the industry, and that's very interesting for us.
So let's jump into. I think that's a good starting point for discussing a bit the business model of NeoVisio. I'm interested to hear like what is the way that you're, let's say, make money.
Yeah. So the basic business model is easy. It's on the one hand, it's consulting, like research or consulting hours against money.
Yeah, you bill hours.
Billable hours, yes. And on the other side, it's hours or just like projects we do for film production, video production, social media management, either on a monthly basis or on a project basis. But basically, yes, it's hours against money. And I would say it's a little bit 50-50. So the whole research and strategy part against our whole creative team that's doing like campaigns and social media management and video photo productions, from like big image productions to really TikTok content, stuff like this. And these people are all in-house. So they are our team. It's not like just freelancers we have. We work with them all in-house, our employees. So that's what we do, yeah.
And how do you measure your success with NeoVisio, like in the projects?
There are a lot of measurements you can do. Of course, what for us in the employer branding and recruiting part is, of course, how many people apply to the job, how many people can you get on the job. Of course, we also measure like classic funnel stuff, like how much awareness did you grow with this employer branding campaign, how many clicks did you get, where did people follow on the landing page or like on your web page, because a lot of companies are just communicating what they do as a business, but not enough like how they are as a company. So these are things we measure, and of course at the end it's the coolest thing to hear. For example, from Schindler, also from Kantonspolizei Uri. That's what we also do. They say, hey, we have the whole police school full of young people. They're going to be a police woman or a policeman in like 3 years. So these are good success rates.
And can you explain why the existing companies are kind of unable to make sense of Gen Z themselves? Because like, is it that kind of a science, or does it really need this kind of expertise to tell companies you have to be present on social media and these are the kind of strategies that work well? Yeah. Can you expand a bit on that? I'm really curious.
That's a good question. Sometimes I also don't understand it why they don't have any resources at large corporations with like several hundred like in marketing or also HR. No idea how they do this. So that's how we come in. I think what's, for example, I wouldn't call it science, but what's really interesting is, for example, at one point I just did social media workshops. I never wanted to be a social media agency, but we did a lot of social workshops, some consulting, and they always said, yeah, we can do it alone, right? We can run social media on our own. 12 months later, 18 months later, now the last 1.5 years, we built up a social media unit or department with 6 or 7 people that are just running social media channels. For example, especially TikTok, where we say, hey, we can produce content for you on every month. And not just because it's a cool subscription model, business model. It's more like they really have no idea what kind of trends, what kind of content, like how do we present ourselves on social media. And then I also think they just need to, because they were doing the same thing for the last 20 years, 30 years, and they have a management, a board of directors where they have to open the budgets, or like open up the budgets and say like, okay, we have to change something. And I think this switch from traditional marketing to get some budgets into the employer branding is something people don't understand usually. But to be honest, I mean, I do it every talk. I say, hey, look, talk to young people, ask them what they want, ask them what they don't want, stuff like this. And I do talks, and then they tell us, Yannick, that's very interesting, but I'm only from HR. I don't know why they say only, but I'm only from HR. Can you tell this to our management team? I say, yeah, but I can do the same speech again. Yeah, that's exactly what I want. But they pay me, and so this is kind of also what we do. But yeah, you have to change the mindset of leadership people. And it's not just because of Gen Z. I think it's a general trend. We really have to get into it. And this is employer branding, recruiting, company culture, because one big part and like scarcity at the end will be, do I have enough people to do the jobs?
Yes, but isn't there kind of a bit of or an observation that I make is kind of what I do, if I had to paint an analogy, is kind of that we have a sea full of fish, but there is not many fish in the sea. There's not enough employees that are around. We have Fachkräftemangel. I have no clue how to say that in English. And the thing you do with employer branding and social media is kind of, the people have a rod, but you give them a nicer rod. But that doesn't change the amount of fish in the sea.
No.
Isn't that something, aren't you then working on, let's say, the wrong end of the problem? Wouldn't it be more effective to try to bring in more fish into the sea, build like a river, a riverbed where more fish can flow
where
in?
do we get the fish?
Probably from other countries around us, from it's probably political work, right?
Yes, that's a lot of political work. That's something else, but that's also very interesting, and I think we really need that. We already saw it in the last few years, and we also need it in the future. And maybe that's not the level I could, but it's not that I'm really politically active. It's more like one level lower, and that's not even on company level, but on whole industry levels. Because I tell you, a lot of industries, they have to work together and be more attractive as an industry, and then they can think about it later as a whole company. But yes, of course. I mean, we can't just create new fish. And what I always think about is, okay, how happy are those fish in the work, or fishes in the workplace? If you create cultures and like new leaderships and like new ways of working, that's also very interesting, not only for Gen Z, but also for the rest of the whole population. I think that makes us more productive, makes us more innovative and stuff like this. That's also what I care about, right? Not just having enough people, but also like how we lead them.
So I think that's exactly what right, because there's the other side of this. The question isn't only bring more fish in, but make the fish more productive. So
make them productive, and especially make them more happy. And that's a big problem a lot of people have. They're coming from like old school work, like people don't have to be happy, they have to work.
Yeah, because we have enough people.
Yeah, exactly. But then I say, no, I think actually even your people, they would work more and happier if they are more productive, if they're more happier then, or if you care about them. These are also things we do. And to be also fully honest, yes, of course, you have a limited amount of fishes in the water, but you have to think about, okay, what could we change that we get a little bit of a bigger share? At the end, it's economics and it's like scarcity. That's what we do in our studies and everything. Also you, like of course, it's not never enough. That's usually the problem. So how do we get a little bit of a bigger share? And that's something else I want to do. And I can tell you, a lot of companies have to do a lot of work.
So, but that would mean just in case you would reach 100% market share at some point, and everyone is better off, but that wouldn't change the thing. But you say, because we're not working with everyone, we make at least those who work with us a little bit better off. So they have
yes,
better.
That's
they can,
true.
For instance, have more employees.
That's one part. But at the end, I always say, if everyone is better off and we have better workplaces, that's good for everyone. And that's not a reason not to do anything. That's usually the wrong way to think about it, in my opinion. And I say, if everyone's better, that's good. Yeah.
And could you share maybe, one or two success stories, success projects that you, in the last couple of years, where you say, I'm really proud that we did this. This really made a difference. That was a lot of fun.
Yes.
What comes to your mind?
Yeah, what comes to mind? I mean, we have so many cool projects running, and of course, not everything is public. What I really liked was, for example, the Schindler story. I can't share details, but we had a really cool exchange with the Schindler team Switzerland, where they say, hey, first of all, we want to do a project in a fast way. That was cool. So they hired us and we said, okay, let's do it fast. That was also a change. And that at the end of all our, I would say, the whole campaign of finding new elevator mechanics, it was just a short video. It was a new kind of recruiting and employer branding way that we got so many applications in, and they actually filled like 10 or 20 jobs, or I don't know, probably more. I can't even share all the details, but something that was really, really cool that we did. Then I just told you, like Kantonspolizei Uri, it doesn't sound so obvious, but it was so interesting, especially in the canton of Uri. Okay, traditional canton, how do we get police? Because everyone is looking for police people. And we did a big campaign last year, employer branding, recruiting videos, everything, a new landing page, new ways of recruiting, and we filled the whole police school. That was also very, very nice. And projects like this, for example.
And I think something that's also interesting to me, you're focusing now on Generation Z. But this generation, like from what I feel, the next generation is already coming, Generation Alpha. Yep. These are the ones born from 2010 to 2025, or that will be born until 2025. How do you, is that something that is coming up already, that's becoming a priority for you as well, or and for the companies?
Yes, I mean, more and more companies are interested, just because also as an outlook, because Gen Z was now also hyped in the media and everything. The problem is still there. It's become more important, but I think we're not going just directly to jump on Gen Alpha. Also because like the first ones are coming in like 2-3 years into the workforce. So we have some time. Maybe I even gonna found a new company with like Gen Alpha people, that are maybe interested to do some entrepreneurial experiences. And I tell them, hey, you're maybe 15, 16, let's do it. I can help you. We have the same setup. We can even use some resources from NeoV. So that would be very, very interesting. And also to jump on this Gen Alpha trend, or the Gen Alpha generation. But on the other hand, it's not that big of a pressure currently, because the other challenges are still there.
Are there already things that we can see that are different in Generation Alpha compared to Gen Z?
They're still young. We haven't done any research. Like sometimes we have some Gen Alpha people in there, because we also have them in our panel. But it's definitely going to be interesting also here. We have a generation probably that not only grew up with social media, but actually just with an iPad, with, swipe and scroll.
Yeah, they can't fold a book, flip a book, but they can flip on the iPad.
Yeah, exactly. And they can all do that before they actually can talk, stuff like this. And I think that's also going to change some in the mind. I mean, even with Gen Z, to be fully honest, we don't know yet the long-term implications of like how fast this life is going. So yeah, what I expect, but this more thesis, is probably that Gen Alpha is a little bit more, I wouldn't say relaxed, but a little bit more reflective on, or they do more reflection on like how they live, how they are in every day, because we have so many influences and little notifications and everything that's going into our mind. I don't know if that's good. And yeah.
And something that you mentioned before, Generation Z, the hype. You also mentioned hype yourself, so it wasn't only me observing that.
Yeah.
I think one reason why people probably have like some, let's say, not issues, but are skeptical about it, is because it really puts this emphasis on Gen Z, but there's other generations as well, right, already in the workforce. And how do you handle this kind of intergenerational difficulty or tensions between some generations that maybe feel less important, because one reason to combat Fachkräftemangel, we have the word again, is to include more of the people that are a bit older, again, to re-include them in the workforce. Can you understand that there's kind of tensions of people saying, yeah, you're focusing on Gen Z, but don't forget about the others?
Of course. I mean, I hear this every week or every month probably, and they never say, hey, I'm not the lawyer of young people. I'm not saying the young people are the only ones important, but it's crazy. And then I usually turn the ball back to the one who's asking the question, like, yeah, why don't you ask your own older employees, older generations, what they want, what they like, how they want to work, And then they usually think, oh yeah, we actually never did this. Now we did it for the first time for the young people because we have a problem. So now let's think about, we do focus groups. We go to the companies, explain them, hey, this is what people in this industry want from you. And older generations would say, yeah, but that's not fair. We also want that. Then I say, hey, that's perfect, because everyone has probably a little requirement of flexibility or whatever. So let's talk about this. What does flexibility means for a younger generation, for an older generation? And let's bring this together. Usually it develops into a larger project then. That's very important also for us. And what I also do is with Sascha Johann, he's Generation X. And we do like workshops and keynotes together, because exactly this, like how do different generations collaborate? What's important also for leadership to emphasize on different generations at the same team, in the same team. Because we're not going to change everyone into one single mindset. That's not something that you should do. It's rather, how can we use the different mindsets and generations to have the best outputs possible?
And maybe to close off this part, one last question, because there were, let's say, employer branding, and there was employer branding before. There was people doing culture in companies before you did it. So what is that you do really different, apart from saying we really have the knowledge about Generation Z and social media? Or is that already enough to say we know that?
I think that's already a lot. And I would even say it's just that we do it and we tackle it, and we really challenge very uncomfortably sometimes the top leadership team of companies, because you said, people are doing it. I can tell you 5 companies that have an HR of like 6 people, but no one's doing any employer branding work or like any agency work or whatever. They just do like administrative stuff. And I think that's very scary. And I also think culture work,
you never can do enough.
I think a lot of companies, they don't do enough culture work, I think. And I don't think we're the only one doing the culture work. I mean, that's also just a small part of our business usually, because then that's like some longer projects for some other people. But I think what we do is like we try to ask the right questions in terms of from the young perspective, very uncomfortably. That's very big value for us as well. Not to have the only single answer, but having the right discussion initiated. How are we working together? That's a big question. Not just what are we doing and why are we doing, like how are we collaborating as a team? And we see in different projects that people are telling us after some workshops, like, hey, this really changed something, or this developed something, how we work.
And can you maybe, for everyone out there that's tuning in, probably we have a lot of young listeners on the podcast. From your experience, how do you get this top leadership attention for topics for Generation Z? You already mentioned it a bit before, but can you expand a bit on that? What kind of, are there strategies that work really well, or is it, how do you do it?
I think, first of all, you shouldn't just mention all the things the company is doing wrong and whatever you want to change and why it's bad and all the bad things. I would always go on the opportunities, be positive and say like, hey, I have this idea, we could change this and this because of this challenge, and we could even gain this or learn this. And actually, I would do what's really important, like this would be the setup of a pitch or whatever internally in a company. And what I would do is actually make sure that, for example, my team leader, that's maybe the best way to do a start, is get this team leader to do discussion rounds of all the different hierarchy levels, but also different generations. And I think the more they talk to each other, so a 22-year-old understands how a CEO of 56 years old works and thinks, I think this gives us a lot of understanding between each other. And also the CEO who says hey, that's interesting, maybe we can do a extended talk and what can we optimize? Because of course, leadership people in the older segments, let's say, they're sometimes afraid, or probably they're a little bit angry of Gen Z wants to change everything, and they only see what they're doing wrong. But I would tell them, hey, here are some opportunities for you.
And let's switch for a couple minutes before you have to leave off for the next session to the St. Gallen Symposium topic, confronting scarcity. What is like the biggest scarcity that you face today as a CEO of Neovisio?
So, of course, we are looking for talents as well. We're looking for people, and it's also scarcity that we see in the whole Swiss economy, like
you
having
need to
enough
do more
people.
employer branding.
Yeah,
consult yourself.
Yeah, exactly. Doing more. Yeah, that's true. But yeah, that's definitely something. And what I also say, and we just discussed this in this first discussion around here at the symposium. How do we make sure that education is catching up with what the needs are in society, or like in economics, or like in the economy? Not only just technology and some AI, but also some big skills like critical thinking, stuff like this. And yeah, that's also something I'm a little bit scared of this scarcity that also in Switzerland, we're a know-how country. And yeah, how do we catch up or how do we keep up with other countries and not just with what's happening in our field? And I'm sometimes afraid, even jobs who think like, yeah, but for us, technology is not so important. I think in every industry, it's important, more or less. And you have to think about how can we implement technology, because in the history, there was always technology that was a big part in growth. And I think that would help us a lot. So it's just people itself, and then the know-how, sometimes skill gap. Yeah.
And what do you expect to learn from, let's say, the more senior leaders that are around, or do you have any specific questions that you'd like to ask them, that you'd like to be answered during the next couple of days?
Yes, I mean, for me, especially, as a founder and you grow as a company, you're always in between. You're super euphoric and happy, and let's take over the world, and then you're like in a panic mode. That's usually that. Sometimes in a week, sometimes in a day, whatever. And what I'm really interested in is also to kind of. I mean, they dealt also with a lot of challenges, with a lot of probably panic modes, and they think like, oh, now everything is collapsing or whatever. Like, what are like one or two strategies how they dealt with that? I think that's really important, or like interesting to learn from, and also just to expand my view on the whole globe, because of course with my job I'm based with certain topics and also certain areas, and that's what I'm looking forward to learn.
And I guess you're being asked that very often, but what can you contribute to the dialogue besides being a GenZ expert? Let's say what maybe also the senior leaders can learn from you, because this is really what it's all about, right? It's about an exchange, a mutual learning experience also.
Yeah, I think maybe that's also something you just mentioned. Sorry, but so it's repeating just one thing. First place is. I realized how to lead young people and actually motivate them and get them on board for whatever journey you want to get on. I think I'm really curious of like how marketing and branding and society is coming together. That's something I could also bring, and especially on like the whole digital storytelling stuff like this. And to be also frank with you, I just think I like to ask maybe tough questions or like uncomfortable questions, but always with the opportunity inside and not just to confront someone. So maybe that's also something where they say, okay, that's also someone who's who's challenging me.
And can we close off the podcast about the three things I think that you mentioned at the beginning that I think is one part of the recipe to make people engaged is be flexible.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, like make sure you're instant enough, you're flexible enough, and you're clear enough.
And is that enough to lead the young generation, or do we need more?
To be fully honest, if we do that right, it's not only for the young generation, but also every generation. Because I mean, you've seen the papers of like values and visions, whatever, and like 6 pages long. If we have 4 values, just make them clear and simple enough. These are the 4 values, stuff like this. So I think, it helps, and it helps generally in leadership. And I think the most important thing that I'll also take away probably this symposium, but in general, is we need leadership people that inspires the next generation to go one step more, to change something, and be at least be at the end the champion in whatever you want to do in life.
Yeah, I think you almost paraphrased the vision of the St. Gallen Symposium, which is right, lead with the next generation in mind. I think you need to rush off to the next session. And I'm just left with saying thank you for being here, for taking the time to discuss with me Generation C, your expertise. And I think I have some great news for you, because I know that on Thursday, the evening event will be around music. And I think there's a jazz band playing. So
cool.
Maybe,
Nice.
I guess you know the world of jazz, but maybe there's a jamming session. So let's see whether we see you holding a trumpet or
the
a drum.
drumsticks.
Do you have the trumpet with you?
No, it's not here. No,
But drums you can play when they're around.
Exactly.
So
Perfect. Yeah, nice.
thank you, Yannick.
Thank you, Oli, for the questions. It was very interesting.
And take care. And thank you for everyone for tuning in. And yeah, that was it. Bye-bye.
Bye.